fun. Oh, that looks good. Guess we're turning the light off. Oh, I know what I can do. That won't work because I'm going to watch. All right, no snoring, people. One of these days I'll get them to rewire that switch so that when we turn one switch off, the entire classroom doesn't go on. All right, so this is a fun lecture. I think you'll enjoy this one, hopefully. This is a model that was developed by some colleagues of mine initially around 2006 they were playing with the idea. They published a simplified version of the model in 2007, and that article is up on Blackboard for you to read. It was published in a PE journal, so it's very easy to read. They tweaked it a little bit. They republished the tweaked version in a very scientific journal. So I don't have that article up because the language is a little laborious to get through in a science journal. So there is an article up there to support this information. So this model that they developed is trying to look at the idea of the relationship between motor competence, physical activity, perceived competence, and health outcomes. Okay? And as I say, the scientific paper came out 2008 or 2009, can't remember which year. And so since then, there's been quite a lot of research published across different age groups using this model to look at this idea. Okay? So if you are reading the literature, you may well come across this model. At conference last year, there were some quite fascinating conversations because some people have been looking at the model and they've said, you know, I don't really agree with you on that, because when I'm working with kids, what I see is this. But that's great because that means the conversation has started and we're starting to look at this relationship. All right? So I like this model, but I haven't done any research using the model. So maybe if I actually tried to use it, I would find some things that I didn't agree with. But we're going to run through it just so you've got an idea of how it works, because I think it's a really interesting version. So the concept of the model, all right, is that if we develop motor competence, so that's what we've been doing on the playground, that's what our MSU chart and our TGMD is about. Can we get these children competent, i.e. their actual skill level, at these fundamental motor skills, right? That competence becomes important to what we see happen with older children and with, at the moment, the literature has looked at young adults, okay? So, actually, let's go back here. So, do I, as an adult, choose to spend my weekend out mountain biking with friends, right? Or, if you've been paying attention on the playground this week, you'll have noticed how difficult it is to get Sawyer engaged when she can't hide in the mastery climate, right? So, when she's under the spotlight, getting her to do anything is very hard, okay? Because once we're overweight, once we're unhealthy, it's difficult to be competent and move becomes less fun, right? She's in a load of doo-doo because the chances of her getting that weight off if her parents don't get her moving soon are minimal. So, what can you do? Right? So, this is the model, right? And what they have done is they've tried to look at movement factors, variables, and look at how these movement variables then increase or decrease the risk of developing overweight and obesity. And then what happens based upon the weight, fat mass, muscle mass, outcome, body composition, what then happens to motor skills, right? So here, the factors they're looking at are motor competence, health-related fitness, physical activity, perceived motor competence, all right? And when you look at the one in the PowerPoint, you'll see some letters here. They are not on the version that is in the article because that's one of the things that they developed as they worked with the model, okay? So, EC is early childhood, MC middle childhood, LC late childhood, okay? Because the initial model was based on research with that age group, not with older youth and adults, okay? So, we look here, motor competence and physical activity for our children on the playground both impact their health-related fitness, and their perceived motor competence might be impacting their physical activity and motor competence, possibly. So for some of them, right, they're actually not very good, but they think they're good, and so they're willing to have a go at things. For some of them, it doesn't quite work that way, but that's one of the issues. There's never anything like a perfect model or a perfect theory. Right? The bit that is really cool about this idea that no one had done before is this set in the middle here. Because what they proposed was that in early childhood, so up to 5.5, 6, kindergarten really does count as early childhood for most people, right? What they proposed was that the levels of physical activity that the children engaged in that age group drive how competent they're going to be at motor skills. Okay? So, how busy I am on the playground relates to how well I would score on a TGMB, how good I am at the skill. Does that make sense? But as we get older and we transition out of early childhood and into middle childhood, the relationship flips. And this is the important part, right? Because now, as we start to work with children who are 7, 8, 9, 10, what we find is that how technically good they are at the skill drives how physically active they choose to be. Right? So, the relationship with this perceived motor competence becomes complicated because when I look at middle and late childhood, how good I am starts to impact how good I think I am, and vice versa, right? But the older we get, the more how actually good I am starts to drive my perceived competence. And if my perceived competence is interacting with physical activity, then I might pull out of being physically active because my perceived competence is bad. Right? So the picture starts to get a little more complicated as we work with slightly older age groups. Okay. Then the next bit we know from the health literature is that levels of physical activity are linked to the risk of obesity, but even the risk of overweight. Right? But overweight isn't considered so problematical for young children because as they grow, sometimes that weight drops off, their metabolism picks up, right? And so they're more interested in what's the risk of obesity. When we look at Sawyer, she's already obese, right? If you think about your BMI data that you collected earlier in the semester, that child is already obese, and she's what, 4? So she's really struggling, okay? So this risk of obesity then tends to, if I'm obese, I tend to lower my physical activity levels, which lowers my motor competence, and I become more and more, I develop more unhealthy weight. And so I get a negative spiral of disengagement because the more unhealthy, the heavier I am, the more overweight, the more obese I am, the worse my motor competence is, right? Because I'm not strong enough to run, I'm not strong enough to jump. I might be okay at throwing, because throwing doesn't involve moving my mass. Okay? But throwing doesn't keep you healthy, so throwing doesn't impact fitness, right? So the more unhealthy, the more overweight, the more obese, the worse the picture gets, because we get this negative impact on competence. My motor competence goes down, and that impacts my physical activity levels, which go down, which increases the risk of obesity, and so we get this negative spiral, right? On the other hand, on the positive, okay, if we've done a good job of getting the kids competent when they're little, and they go into their middle childhood feeling relatively confident of their movement skills, then being good at gross motor skills drives my physical activity, and the higher my physical activity, the higher my motor competence, the higher my perceived competence, I think I can try something and do something, the more I exercise and am physically active, the healthier my weight will be, and the healthier my weight is, with practice, with good feedback, would lead to higher levels of motor competence, higher levels of physical activity, right? So now we get a positive spiral of engagement, but it all goes back to what happened in early childhood. Were we able to get those children physically active enough to improve their motor competence so that as they get older, they want to engage in movement? Does that make some sense? Right. So it's a very fun model, and they've also started modeling with youth, so teenagers, and the people who believe the model is a good proposal are indicating that they feel that it also relates to youth, right? The more competent they are, the more willing they are to try a new sport, to join an after-school club, right? And if they don't feel competent, then they start to drop out. So this just kind of summarizes that idea for you. If I've got low motor competence, over time that's going to drive lower levels of physical activity, right? That negative spiral. What did Dr. Coker say? What do I have to do to get better at motor skills? Practice, right? So, if I've got low levels of physical activity, I'm not practicing, okay? And then I have less opportunity to improve my motor skills. Okay? And then, because I'm useless at moving, I self-select out. So then we start giving children the choice of whether they do PE when they go to high school. Right? New Mexico only makes you take 1 semester of PE in your entire time in high school. The rest of the time you get to choose. Well, if I don't like moving and I'm not any good at moving, I'm not going to pick PE and do any practice and get better at it. I'm going to go do computer club or something. Right? So we start to self-select out. Our perception of our motor skills goes down. That drives our physical activity even lower, and it just gets worse and worse. Right? If we've got this positive spiral, then because I am actually good, that makes me feel like I'm good and I can do more, I can try something, and I'm willing to be more physically active. I enjoy it, it's fun. I would choose to be physically active after school. That gives me more opportunity to practice. It opens up the door to more opportunity to try new movement skills, which increases my repertoire. Right? The bigger my repertoire, the bigger the foundation of the number of skills I can do, the more chance I am to be active as I get older. So, on my positive spiral, I just become more and more competent at moving. And the picture gets better and better. And it's easier to stay healthy when I'm working full time and I've got 2 kids and I've got to get them to school and then go to work and then feed them in the evening and then help them do their homework at the weekend, because it's hard to fit in physical activity if you're not motivated at that point in your life. Okay. So the development of motor competence in these early childhood years is looking as though it's going to play a very big role down the line in how healthy these people will be, right? How physically active they choose to be as adults, right? Are they positive about their capabilities as adults? We've never had that actual model to work with on a research project. We've had the idea, we think, that if we have children more physically active, that we would have adults who will be healthier, but we don't have the research to support. Might not be true. Right? What if it makes no difference at all? What if you're sedentary until you're 14 and then suddenly you get interested in sport and you start trying to play sport? Because we just don't know. There's no research to back it up. So the model provides a foundation to start to do some organized research to see what the answers are. Right? And because obesity and overweight are such a big problem, there's a lot of funding for this kind of work right now, because your healthcare system, your insurance system can't cope with the problems that are developing with overweight and obesity in the country. Okay? Insurance premiums are through the roof. They go up every year. So, okay? Short and sweet, but interesting, hopefully. Make sure that you read the article because it will give you some more exposure to the idea of it. Alright, and since it's not in the textbook, it's not something that we built in earlier in the semester, but I think it is a really interesting concept to consider if I'm working, especially if you're going to work in a more health-focused job, like a PE teacher or a fitness trainer or a strength and conditioning coach, right? Then these kinds of ideas could drive some of the way you choose to run your program. Questions? Okay, a couple of people emailed me papers through Outlook. Please make sure that you go back and email them through Blackboard if you didn't. I haven't checked Blackboard yet. But I want them on Blackboard so they're backed up for the end of the semester.